Rwanda has begun 100 days of mourning for the over 800,000 people killed in the 1994 genocide. President Paul Kagame telling Rwandans today they must stick to the course in rebuilding the country. He's blamed European colonialists for dividing Hutus and Tutsis, but said that Rwandans were ultimately to blame for the killings. Let's go live now to eNCA Group News editor Ben Sedi, standing by for us in Kigali. Ben, a very good evening to you. I presume it's been a day throughout the country of somber reflection. How's it played out?
Yes, very much so, Jeremy. Good evening. The streets were largely deserted this morning. It's a public holiday as Rwanda starts 100 days of mourning for the more than 800,000 people that were killed in the genocide 20 years ago. President Paul Kagame early this morning lit a flame of remembrance at the Kigali genocide memorial before moving to the Amahoro Stadium, where he addressed around about 10,000 people, I would say, many dignitaries as well, African leaders, particularly from the East African region. We hear the likes of Yoweri Museveni. He spoke to and others as well, Salva Kiir from South Sudan. No representation from South Africa at all. And we know that Rwanda and South Africa have been at loggerheads recently over assassinations of Rwandan dissidents in South Africa. South Africa has basically blamed the Rwandan government for that. The Rwandans have denied that. Former President Thabo Mbeki was here, his office tells me, in his personal capacity, not representing the South African government at all. In President Kagame's speech, he spoke about how Rwanda had, by all accounts, was pretty much on the way to being a failed state in 1994, and that it really has recovered well from the ashes of genocide. He said, as you mentioned, that colonial powers were responsible over decades, really, for dividing Hutus and Tutsis here in Rwanda, but that Rwandans, at the end of the day, have to bear responsibility for the terrible events of what happened here 2 decades ago. I must also note that it was very emotional for some people in the crowd. Round about, I'd say, perhaps 30, perhaps 40 people had to be carried out. The sound of wailing punctuated the air throughout pretty much the whole ceremony this morning, and it was quite terrible and quite emotional to hear all those feelings, I think, coming to the surface from people who remember those events so clearly of 20 years ago.
Ben, also saying that ordinary Rwandans have to stick to the course when it comes to rebuilding the country. What would he have ordinary Rwandans do in that respect?
I didn't quite hear the question, but certainly I think when he was saying Rwandans need to stick the course, he was essentially tackling critics of his government who have said that Rwanda's path under Paul Kagame, although economically successful, has not necessarily been as socially successful as he would like to think it. There is very little in the way of democracy here. There's very little in the way of free political activities, a free media, and he's come under a lot of recent criticism for that, particularly overseas, not so much here. And I think he's really saying to ordinary Rwandans that, look, we have our difficulties, but we've come a tremendously long way in the last 20 years, and we need to stick to that course. We mustn't change course now. The unity of the country is paramount, and there may be some sacrifices we have to make in that regard if we're going to reach the place we want to in the next 20 years.
You deserve to know more.
eNCA.com